Orion Nash didn't do lines, he had assistants for this kind of thing. But his driver had taken the wrong exit. A surprise thunderstorm had knocked out his VIP screening, and now here he was, standing in a sticky movie theater lobby, waiting behind a woman who was arguing with the teenage cashier about whether or not a matinee discount still applied at 6:15. "Look," the woman said, pulling her damp curls out of her face as she laughed. "I'm not trying to rob the theater. Just saying, it's not my fault your clock is fast." She wore a faded denim jacket, sneakers that had definitely seen better days, and clutched a paper bag of popcorn like it was a priceless artifact. Orion's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't his type, at all. But something about the way she stood there confident, unfazed, like the world didn't scare her, made him not look away. The cashier gave a helpless shrug. "Sorry, ma'am. It's full price now." She turned, stepping aside with a dramatic sigh, and nearly collided with Orion's chest. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to squash your suit." He glanced down. "It's custom. You'd need more momentum." Her eyes flicked over his sharp navy coat, the charcoal slacks, the way his watch gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Figures," she muttered with a grin. "You look like you own the building." "I own a few," he replied casually, already regretting it. She raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Real estate mogul? Hedge fund vampire? Secretly Batman?" A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. He hadn't laughed all day. "Close enough." She handed over her card without looking back at him. "Well, Batman, enjoy your overpriced popcorn. I'm going to sit in the third row and pretend the world doesn't exist for 2 hours." "Which movie?" he asked before he could think better of it. She pointed to the screen showing a small indie romance. "That one. I like stories where people fall in love for real." That stunned him. Not the movie. The way she'd said it, like she meant it. She turned then, walking toward the theater doors, curls bouncing, bag of popcorn shaking with every step. And something inside him, something he'd long buried under contracts, board meetings, and private flights, twitched. He bought a ticket to the same movie. By the time he stepped inside the dark theater, she'd already taken a seat. Third row, dead center. He hesitated, then slid into the seat beside her. She looked at him, startled. "You're kidding. You said third row." "I'm following instructions." "You don't seem like the kind of guy who follows instructions." "I don't," he agreed. She laughed, settling in. "I'm Odessa Clarke. In case you're planning to stalk me." "Orion Nash," he said, offering his hand. "In case you want to Google me later." She didn't shake it. She just looked at him, eyes narrowing like she was trying to figure something out. "Your name sounds like a constellation and a Wall Street scandal." "That's weirdly accurate." The previews started. She didn't say anything else. But halfway through the film, when the on-screen couple kissed in the rain and a sniffle caught in her throat, he quietly passed her a napkin. She took it without looking at him, whispering, "Thanks. These stupid movies always get me." He nodded, heart suddenly pounding louder than the theater speakers. When the lights came up, she stretched and stood like she hadn't just cried over fictional characters. "Well, Orion Nash, thanks for not being a creep." "I try." She turned to leave and he panicked. "Dinner." She stopped. "What?" "Dinner. With me. Now." She laughed again, like it was the most ridiculous thing she'd heard all week. "You want to get dinner with someone you met in a movie line?" "I stood in that line for 5 minutes," he said. "And you were the only interesting thing about it." That made her pause. "Fine," she said after a moment. "As long as it's not some rooftop sushi place where I have to pretend to like raw fish." He smiled. "Burger truck?" Her eyes lit up. "Now that's more like it." They ended up at a food truck parked under a flickering neon sign, sitting on overturned crates, sharing fries and stories. She taught art at a community center and took care of her younger sister. He told her he ran a few businesses but didn't elaborate. She didn't ask. By the time they finished eating, he didn't want the night to end. "You're not what I expected," she said, watching the city lights blur across the wet pavement. "What did you expect? A guy in a suit with a 5-figure watch? I figured you'd be boring." "And? You're not," she admitted. "But I still think you might be Batman." He laughed. "Can I see you again?" She hesitated, then pulled a pen from her pocket and scribbled something on a napkin. "Meet me here next Friday." If you're not 10 minutes early, I'm leaving. No number. If you're serious, you'll show, she said with a wink, and then she was gone, her curls disappearing into the night. Orion stared at the napkin like it was a stock certificate worth millions. For the first time in years, he was nervous. And for the first time in his life, he actually wanted to be 10 minutes early. Orion arrived 12 minutes early. The burger truck's neon sign wasn't flickering tonight, it was out completely. A single bulb over the order window cast a dull yellow glow on the street, making the spot feel more like a secret than a meeting place. He didn't mind. It meant fewer people, fewer distractions. He adjusted the cuffs of his slate gray button-down, not a suit, but close enough, and glanced around. The napkin she'd written on was folded in his pocket, though he didn't need it. He'd memorized the time and place after the first glance. At exactly 7 o'clock, she rounded the corner, her hair pulled back in a loose knot, a canvas tote slung over one shoulder. "No suit this time," she said, eyeing him as she stepped closer. "You requested no sushi, not no tailoring," he replied. "I suppose I should be grateful you didn't bring a driver to wait for you in the shadows." "I considered it," he admitted. "But I wasn't sure how you felt about men with shadows." She laughed softly, then nodded toward the truck. "I hope you didn't eat already." "I haven't eaten since noon." "Then let's make this count." They ordered, then sat on the same crates as last time. But the air between them felt different, more charged, more aware. As if something had shifted between the first meeting and now. As they unwrapped their burgers, she glanced at him sideways. "So, Orion Nash, you said you run a few businesses." "I did say that." She took a bite, chewed, then leaned forward. "That's the kind of thing people say when they're trying not to say something." He met her gaze. "Most people find titles more interesting than truth. I wasn't sure which one you'd prefer." "What if I want both?" For a moment, he considered brushing her off with something vague. But she didn't look like she'd accept vague tonight. "I'm the founder and CEO of Nash Holdings. Private acquisitions, equity, infrastructure. We've got stakes in over a dozen markets." She blinked once. "So, you're not just Batman. You're the Justice League." "I don't wear a cape. Yet." They ate in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "That sounds like a job that doesn't leave a lot of room for burgers on crates." "It doesn't. But I'm here." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because last week I sat next to a stranger in a theater and forgot what my schedule looked like. That doesn't happen to me." She tilted her head. "So you're saying I derailed your whole empire with popcorn and a matinee ticket?" "I'm saying you made me want to see what it's like to not be in charge of everything for 5 minutes." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she wiped her fingers on a napkin and studied him like she was trying to see underneath his clothes, not in the way most women did, but beneath the wealth, the reputation. "I work 6 days a week," she said eventually. "Some nights I fall asleep on the couch because I'm too tired to make it to bed. I haven't been on a vacation in 3 years, and my idea of luxury is getting takeout that isn't pizza." He watched her carefully, unsure what she was building to. "So if this is something," she continued, "then I need to know you're not just doing it because you're bored or because I'm the only person who doesn't recognize you from a Forbes cover." "I'm not bored," he said, tone low and steady. "And I've never cared less about being recognized." She looked down at her burger, then back up at him. "Then I guess we're two exhausted people eating greasy food under a broken light." "That sounds better than most of my calendar." She smiled quietly, then pushed her carton of fries toward him. "You want the rest?" He took one. "I'm not taking your fries unless you're absolutely done." "I'm sure. But if you're going to eat them, you have to answer one question." "Anything." She leaned in, elbows on her knees. "What's the last thing you did that scared you?" He didn't answer right away. No one asked him things like that. People asked about numbers, timelines, projections. Not fear. "This," he said finally. She raised an eyebrow. "Showing up here," he clarified. "With you, not knowing what you'd say, not having any control. That scares you?" He nodded. "Because I want to be here, and I never want things I don't control." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she stood, brushing off her jeans. "Come on." "Where?" "You're not the only one who's allowed to be mysterious." They walked 6 blocks in silence. She led him into a narrow alley flanked by 2 shuttered shops, then slid a key into an unmarked side door. The space smelled like clay and paint. A single overhead bulb lit a row of canvases leaning against the wall. In the far corner, a cracked speaker played something soft and instrumental. "This is mine," she said. "Well rented. I use it for painting when I'm not teaching. No one knows about it except my sister." He looked around. "It's beautiful. It's unfinished. But it's mine." She crossed to one of the canvases and pulled the cover off. It was a cityscape, but not the usual kind. This one wasn't about buildings or bridges, it was about shadows and light. About the way people moved through a city without ever really seeing each other. He stepped closer. "Did you paint this?" "I'm trying to capture what it feels like to be in the middle of everything and still be invisible." He turned to her. "You're anything but invisible." She held his gaze for several seconds. Then, without warning, she reached up and kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It was deliberate, searching, as if she was trying to confirm something she wasn't ready to say aloud. When she pulled back, she didn't apologize. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You scare me too," she whispered. He didn't move. "Good." They stood in the quiet of that studio, surrounded by unfinished work and soft music, the weight of something new pressing between them. Neither of them said what it was. But neither of them walked away. The next time Orion saw her, it was because he rearranged an entire quarterly strategy meeting just to visit the community center where she worked. He didn't announce himself. He walked in like any other guest, crisp dark jeans, tailored jacket, no entourage. The receptionist offered him a clipboard, mistaking him for a volunteer. He didn't correct her. Through the wide windows of a multi-purpose room, he saw Odessa kneeling beside a child, guiding his brush across a sheet of paper. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, paint smeared on her forearm, and her face was lit with the kind of joy he rarely saw in boardrooms. When she finally noticed him, her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't stop what she was doing. She finished helping the boy, then stood, walked toward him, and said, "You're early. You sound surprised. I figured someone with your calendar would be late by default. I moved a few things." She crossed her arms. "You skipped something important to come here?" "Not skipped. Postponed. There's a difference." She tilted her head. "And what am I to you exactly, Mr. Nash? Am I a postponement?" He didn't flinch. "You're the only thing I've made time for all week that actually mattered." Her arms unfolded. "I have exactly 20 minutes before I have to lead a mural workshop for the teen group. You can stay if you don't mind getting your hands dirty. I brought a change of clothes." That earned him a quiet laugh. "Of course you did." 10 minutes later, he was standing in front of a blank concrete wall, holding a brush. Odessa handed him a palette of faded primary colors and nodded toward an outline already sketched in charcoal. "We're painting stories," she said. "Each student picks a memory they want to keep forever and paints a piece of it here. It's about permanence. Making something that lasts." He looked at her. "What if you don't have a memory you want to keep?" She didn't answer. Instead, she dipped her brush in blue and began filling in the curve of a wave along the bottom edge of the wall. He watched her for a moment, then crouched beside a half-drawn skyline and began to paint. They worked in silence, surrounded by the buzz of teenagers laughing, arguing over color choices, and humming along to the speaker in the corner. Odessa didn't hover. She trusted him to figure it out. That alone made his chest tighten. When the bell rang, the students trickled out, leaving the wall half-finished and the air thick with the smell of acrylic paint. Odessa wiped her hands on a towel, leaned against the windowsill, and studied him. "You paint like someone who doesn't want to be seen." He set down his brush. "You're not the first person to tell me that. You don't let people in easily." "No, why?" He looked at her, the question hanging between them. "Because when you grow up in a house full of people who only speak in demands, you learn quick not to show them where it hurts." Her expression softened, but she didn't move. "And now I'm still unlearning that." She nodded, pushing off the windowsill. "Come on. I want to show you something." They drove in silence, her old hatchback rattling slightly as they wound through narrow streets. She pulled up in front of a modest brick house with a crooked mailbox and a porch light that flickered once before staying on. "This is where I grew up," she said, stepping out. "My mom passed when I was 17. My sister was 10. I took over everything after that: school drop-offs, bills, cooking, all of it." Orion followed her up the steps. "You raised her." "I did what I had to. We made it work." Inside, the living room was small but warm. Worn throw pillows, mismatched frames, and a faint scent of lavender gave it the feel of a lived-in memory. "No one's ever been here," she said quietly. "Not anyone I've dated." He looked at her. "Why me?" "Because you looked at my painting like it said something you'd never heard before." They sat on the couch, legs brushing, the silence between them thick but not uncomfortable. She turned toward him, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I'm not one of those women who gets swept off her feet," she said. "I don't have time for games. If you're here, I need to know it's not just curiosity." "I'm not curious," he said. "I'm invested." "In what?" "In you. In this." She studied him like she was searching for cracks. "You're used to control. You're used to people doing what you say. I don't want that here." She reached for his hand, her fingers rough with dried paint and calluses. "Then you'd better be ready for messy, because I don't come neat. I come with late nights, a little sister still figuring things out, and a life that doesn't have room for someone who disappears when it gets hard." "I don't disappear," he said. "I build. I fight. I stay." She nodded slowly. "Then you need to see what staying looks like." They didn't kiss. Not in that moment. Instead, she rested her head on his shoulder, and he leaned back into the couch, heart pounding with the quiet certainty that this simple, unvarnished connection was more terrifying than billion-dollar acquisitions. And somehow it was exactly what he wanted. The moment Orion stepped onto the rooftop, he knew he was out of his depth, and he'd designed 3 of the most exclusive sky lounges in Manhattan. But this wasn't one of them. String lights swayed gently across a rusted railing. A single table sat in the center, draped in white linen, 2 mismatched chairs tucked beneath it. Odessa stood beside it, barefoot, lighting one stubby candle after another with a matchbook that kept fizzling out. "You're late," she murmured without looking up. "I was trying to carry a cake and not ruin my suit again," he said, lifting the white box he held like it was made of glass. She turned. "You brought dessert?" "I thought about champagne, but I figured sugar was safer." He set the box down beside the plates and looked around. "This is your roof?" She nodded. "Above my studio. The landlord lets me use it when I promise not to host raves." He slipped off his blazer, folding it neatly over a chair. "And this is what? A raveless dinner." "This is me meeting you halfway," she said, pulling out a tin of takeout containers. "You've taken me to places that smell like polished marble and cost more than my rent. I wanted to return the favor, with the best Thai food in Queens." He pulled out a chair and Saturday. "You didn't have to do this." "Exactly. That's why it matters." They ate under the dull orange haze of a distant skyline, the city humming around them. Between bites of Penang curry and sweet chili noodles, she refilled their water glasses from a thermos and asked, "What happens to your world if you don't show up for a day?" He wiped his fingers with the edge of a napkin. "It gets nervous. Then it reorganizes. And if you don't show up for a week, it adapts. The truth is, most of the people around me operate on fear of breaking rhythm. But rhythms can be rewritten." She leaned back. "So what are you rewriting?" He looked at her across the table, her cheek pressed into her palm, curls shifting with the breeze. "Everything." She didn't smile, didn't break the moment with a joke. Instead, she drew in a breath and said, "I've been offered a gallery spot, a real one, uptown. They want 6 pieces by fall." His heart skipped. "That's incredible." "It is," she said, biting her lip. "But it means scaling back at the center. Fewer classes. Less time with the kids. Less time with my sister. And I'm scared that if I chase this, I'll lose the parts of my life that feel most solid. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You don't have to choose between being seen and being good. She looked at him, searching for something in his face. Do you believe that? I have to. Or I'll never be anything but a man in a glass office pretending he's already lived his best years. The candle between them flickered violently, then steadied. You've changed, she said softly. Because of you. No. You changed because you let yourself. I just happened to be there when you noticed. He stood and walked to the edge of the roof, hands in his pockets. I'm selling the tech division. She blinked. What? I'm restructuring. It's been draining resources and energy for over a year. I kept it alive out of stubbornness. But I don't need to prove anything anymore. She rose slowly. You're really doing it? I already signed the papers. I'm consolidating. More room for what actually matters. She stepped toward him. And what matters, Orion? He turned. This. You. A life that doesn't just look good in press releases. She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. You scared me. When I first met you, I thought, if I let myself care, you'd disappear into your world again. That I'd be a flicker. You're not a flicker, he said, voice low. You're the light I didn't know I was chasing. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. I want to do this with you, but I need to be sure you're in it. Not just for now, for when things are messy, when I'm tired, when the gallery rejects a series and I think I'm failing. I'll carry you through it, he whispered, or I'll sit on the floor beside you until you're ready to stand again. She kissed him gently. Not like the first time, there was no hesitation now, no testing of boundaries. Just the quiet certainty of a choice made. When they pulled apart, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. What's that? She asked. A lease. For a gallery space. In Midtown. Your name's on it. Don't worry, it's not a gift. It's a partnership. You'll own 51%. I'll own 49%. You'll have full creative control. Her mouth parted, but no words came. He continued. You won't have to give up the center. We'll fund it with a grant from the foundation I'm setting up. You'll still teach, still paint, still run things your way. But now you'll have the freedom to breathe. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You did all this? I did it because you made me want to build something that mattered. And you matter more than anything I've ever built. She reached for the envelope, pressed it to her chest, then stepped back and said, You really bought a gallery for me. I bought it for us. So you'd never have to choose between your future and your heart. She laughed through the tears. You're still ridiculous. And you're still the woman who made standing in a movie line the most important moment of my life. He took her hand, pulling her close again. I love you, Odessa, he said. Not because you fit into my world, but because you cracked it open and made room for more. I love you too, she whispered. But if you ever try to buy me another building without asking, I'm going to make you paint the whole thing with a toothbrush. He grinned. Deal. From the rooftop, the city hummed alive, imperfect and wide open. Below, the world spun on. But up here, between candlelight and curry, two people stood in the middle of everything. Finally seen. And absolutely, completely home. The gallery opened on a rainy Thursday. Not the kind of rain that ruined plans, but the kind that made the city shine, wet pavement glowing under streetlights, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers across sidewalks. Inside the glass-walled space, the warmth of the soft lighting and murmuring crowd pushed the gray drizzle far into the background. Odessa stood near the entrance, wearing a simple black jumpsuit and gold earrings that caught the light when she moved. Her curls were tucked into a loose braid over one shoulder, and her eyes scanned the room not nervously, but with purpose. She'd hung each piece herself. Every canvas told a different story, glimpses of childhood, flashes of grief, moments of stillness. She hadn't curated for shock or applause. She curated for truth. And judging by the clusters of guests quietly studying each brushstroke, it was working. Orion arrived with exactly 1 minute to spare before the official start time. No driver. No fanfare. Just him in a charcoal coat with rein still clinging to the shoulders. She met him halfway through the room. You're cutting it close, she said. I wanted to see the whole place from outside first. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. This came today. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the letterhead. Her fingers tightened as she read. They accepted the full series, she murmured. All 6. They want to feature it in the international show in Berlin. I told you, he said quietly, your work would outgrow the city. She looked up. But I don't want to outgrow this life. You won't, he said. You'll expand it. A woman interrupted them to ask about one of the larger canvases. Odessa excused herself, leaving Orion to wander the gallery alone. He didn't mind. Watching her command the space, confident, thoughtful, never performing, was a show in itself. When the crowd thinned, they slipped out the back and climbed the stairs to the rooftop. The same rooftop where they'd once shared takeout and promises. Tonight, it had been transformed. A low table sat in the center, covered in flickering candles. Hanging lanterns swayed gently above, casting gold light on the puddles left from the earlier storm. A single covered dish rested on the table, still steaming. Odessa raised an eyebrow. Did you cook? I hired someone, he said. But I plated it myself. She laughed and sat, pulling her chair closer to his. You really don't know how to do anything halfway. Only when it matters. They ate slowly, the city murmuring below them. Neither rushed, neither filled silence with noise. When the plates were cleared, Orion reached into his coat pocket again and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he set it between them on the table and said, I thought about waiting, making a big scene. But I don't want a performance. I want a life. She reached for the box, her fingers brushing his. I'm not perfect. I don't want perfect. I want real. I have responsibilities that won't shrink to make room for someone else. Then we'll build around them. She opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple but unmistakably one of a kind. A delicate gold band wrapped around a small, raw-cut sapphire. Not polished, not flawless, but striking in its honesty. He met her eyes. I want to marry you, not to claim you, to walk with you, to build something no one else ever could with me. Not in spite of your world, but because of it. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She reached across the table, took his hand, and said, yes. But if you ever try to turn our wedding into a gala, I reserve the right to elope. He laughed, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere so deep it startled even him. We'll do it your way, he said. No marble floors. No orchestras. Just you, me, and whoever we want beside us. She slid the ring onto her finger. That's all I've ever needed. The wedding happened 6 weeks later in a greenhouse filled with wildflowers and mismatched chairs. Her sister stood beside her, eyes bright with pride. His assistant wept silently in the back row. There were no reporters, no press releases. Just vows whispered beneath vines and sunlight. They moved into a brownstone near the community center, her art studio on the top floor, his office tucked away on the ground level. He downsized his portfolio, keeping only the ventures that aligned with the kind of life he wanted to live. She accepted the Berlin showcase with the condition that her teen students' work would travel alongside hers. Life didn't get easier. The world didn't soften around them. But they held each other through it, through deadlines and late nights, through paint-splattered mornings and boardroom calls that ran long. One evening, months later, Orion came home to find the living room covered in sketches. Odessa sat cross-legged on the floor, her glasses slipping down her nose, a pencil tucked behind her ear. You're home early, she said. I missed you. She looked up, brow furrowing slightly. You okay? I've been thinking, he said, setting down his briefcase. About legacy. About what we leave behind. She stood, brushing graphite from her hands. You're not getting existential on me, are you? I was thinking, he said, pulling her close, that maybe we should build something even bigger than this. Her eyes narrowed. You're not buying another building, are you? He grinned. No. I was thinking of something far more permanent. She stilled. He nodded slightly. If you're ready, I'd love to start a family. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her arms wrapped around him slowly, deliberately. I've been thinking about that too, she whispered. I didn't know how to bring it up. Then consider it brought up. They stood there in the middle of their imperfect home, surrounded by art and light and the sound of possibility. And in the years that followed, they built that future messy and brilliant and undeniably theirs. Their daughter had his eyes and her mother's fire. She learned to walk in the gallery, her paint-streaked hands leaving permanent fingerprints on one of the display walls. They kept them there, because everything that mattered was built by hand, by heart, and by choosing each other every single day. And they never stopped choosing.